Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I just wanted to give you a quick little introduction about myself to get things started. My name is Philip Barricado, and I'm working for an international conservation agency to provide a recommendation for the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry as to which of the 5 candidate islands should be set aside for nature preserves that best conserve orchid species found within them. Our International Conservation Agency specializes in orchid conservation, so that is the main species we are focusing on for our recommendation. Although there are many valuable species that could be chosen to use as a reason for conservation on these islands, I think orchids are a great choice as a representative for these islands. Orchids play a key role in their ecosystems while also holding cultural and economic value for the people of Indonesia. Their stunning and unique flowers attract tourists and support a thriving horticulture industry. Across these islands, there are 15 species of native orchids, each forming a specialized partnership with pollinators like bees and butterflies, which rely on them for food and in return help spread their pollen and assist with the reproductive process of orchids. They are also highly sensitive to environmental changes such as deforestation and pollution, making them an excellent indicator species for determining the health of ecosystems and their biodiversity. Before I get into the methods and results, I wanted to briefly describe the situation to make sure the whole audience is on the same page. We have a 475 million rupiah budget, which is about 14% less than the 552 million required to conserve all 5 islands, which means we need to determine the most beneficial and effective way to use what we have to conserve the highest level of biodiversity possible. With species abundance data collected from all 5 islands, we can use many different statistical tests to quantify things such as species richness, uniqueness of species on each island, what species are endemic versus what species are abundant, and determine what islands are the most biodiverse and important for conservation purposes. From figure 1 on this slide, we can do some quick math and it looks like it'll come down to deciding whether to keep as much land as possible by selecting to conserve islands 1, 2, and 3, which will get us just over the 77 million needed. Or we can conserve islands 1, 2, 4, and 5, which will also get us over the 77 million. But we will conserve more islands. So that will be the decision we have to make. There are many different statistical tests that can be used to quantify what islands are more valuable in terms of biodiversity and therefore the most important to conserve. Testing for species richness provides data on what islands have the most species, which is critical knowledge for conservation purposes. Also, looking for any patterns when it comes to species abundance can help us look at how similar each island is in terms of its species populations and similarities. Shannon-Weiner index comes up with an alpha diversity score by looking at both species richness and evenness at a site or island in this case, and the higher the score is, the more diverse the island is. Another important aspect to consider is how similar to each other the islands are. Determining similarity is important because if we conserve islands that are most similar to one another, then we will lose the unique species found on islands that have any. So picking islands that are least similar to one another is important for keeping biodiversity levels higher. Our results show that the islands follow the species-area relationship, which is a common pattern found in biology that shows how the bigger an area is, the more species it should have. Here we found a total species richness of 15, total population of individuals of 177, and total island size at 184 kilometers squared. The top pie chart depicts the percentage of total number of species found on each island, and as we can see, Island 1 has 87% of orchid species found, which is 13 out of the 15, so that's the highest by far. We then have Islands 2 and 4, each containing 6 species, and Island 3 containing 9, which makes it the second most in terms of species richness. Island 5 is the lowest, with only 2 species found, but those species are endemic and are only found on that island. The middle pie chart shows the percent of total individuals each island has, and as we see, it follows the species area dynamic almost perfectly. The bottom chart shows the percent of total land mass each island has. Half of the available land is on Island 1, making it the largest by far, which makes sense because it also has the most species richness and highest populations found. Here, we can see that the Shannon-Weiner index scores follow the species area relationship exactly, with the biggest islands having the higher scores and the small islands having the lower scores. Higher scores also typically indicate a more heterogeneous community, which is confirmed by the fact that no single species dominates any of the islands. The graph on the top right shows the similarity between islands and their species. We can see that Island 5 is the most unique, with Islands 2 and 4 being closely related, and Islands 1 and 3 being closely related. The chart on the bottom right shows the different abundance patterns of each island and what model fits each pattern best. It shows that Islands 1 and 3 most closely resemble the preemption model, indicating that species arrival time is what dictated the species community. The other 3 islands follow a broken stick or no model, which is a more even distribution of species and their abundance. Ultimately, our recommendation is to conserve islands 1, 2, 4, and 5, and allow island 3 to remain unprotected. Even though we will be conserving less land, we will be able to conserve Island 5's 2 endemic species, along with all other 13 species found on the islands. By protecting 4 islands instead of 3, there will also be additional refuges for orchid species should something like a natural disaster or disease occur on one of the islands. The cost of protecting these 4 islands is only 432 million rupees, leaving 43 million rupees that can be used for additional funding to further protect or conduct important research on the islands. Island 3 is also large enough to provide the country with a large area of land that can be used for development, agriculture, or whatever they want for a long time without the need to expand or move into additional spaces that were used for conservation purposes. Some potential caveats to this recommendation is that we only use species presence and abundance data without including important variables such as climate, soil type, resource availability, and more, meaning there are other factors at play that need to be considered when it comes to ensuring we conserve the most species. I also found that if the ministry can raise an additional 2 million rupees, they can conserve the much larger and biodiverse Island 3 and let Island 2 be used for other purposes instead. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day.